on December 16th. George, will you read the Zoom information?
Yes, meeting is being held virtually pursuant to gubernatorial executive orders issued pursuant to the pandemic, the disaster proclamations issued as a result of the pandemic, and also to recent amendments to the Open Meetings Act, providing for virtual meetings during the course of a public health emergency.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ballantini,
Here.
Mr. McFarland,
Here.
Mr. Straza,
Here.
Mr. Noonan,
Here.
Ms. Williams,
Here.
Chairperson Harris.
Here. Okay, everybody's here, so we have a quorum. Is there any public comment today?
There is nobody registered in advance to speak for public comment, and no one is here at City Hall.
Okay, thank you. So can we review the minutes and approve the minutes? I think we have several sets of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to.
I move to approve the minutes.
Oh, I think we have one off of the chairman. Maybe can we use the one that is not the chairman?
Straza. I motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, minutes approved. So we can move on to the regular agenda.
Sorry, one second. I think we have to do a voice vote, George, right?
That's correct.
And
Good catch, Katie.
And also, was the motion to approve both sets of minutes from September 16th?
Yes.
Okay. And November 18th. Ms. Smith,
Mr. Ballantini,
Yes.
Mr. McFarland,
Yes.
Mr. Straza,
Yes.
Mr. Noonan,
Yes.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
Chairperson Harris.
Yes. Okay, minutes approved. Let's move to the regular agenda. Going on to Z2620. Can we have a staff report?
yes, one second. Let me share my screen. I'm getting situated here. Apologize. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. There we go. Case Z2620 is a variance request for 1125 Raider Run for a driveway expansion. The code allows 24 feet for the size of the driveway where the driveway intersects the sidewalk. So right on the private property, right behind the sidewalk where the two intersect, the code allows a maximum width of 24 feet, and the applicant is requesting to extend beyond that. And staff is recommending against the requested variance. So 1125 Raider Road is located on Bloomington's east, Raider Run, I'm sorry, is located on Bloomington's east side. This subdivision is improved with 0 lot line homes. That means that the homes are built right up to the side lot line on one side, and then they have a larger side yard setback on the other side. That's how the subdivision was designed. Subdivision includes single family houses. There's a mixture of 1- and 2-story houses, and most have front-facing garages. It is zoned R2. R2 allows up to 13 units per acre. The lot sizes are also a little bit smaller than our standard lot size for the R2 district, but that's part of the neighborhood's design, and it was designed intentionally. The property is surrounded by other R2 zoning, with the exception of C1 on the east side. The neighborhood is primarily single family. There are some apartments on the east side. And as I mentioned, there's no setback on the north side of this property, and then a 10-foot setback on the south side. Here's some photos of some of the adjacent homes. As you can see, they have a certain aesthetic to them that gives the neighborhood a certain type of character. And some of the other driveways. The picture of the driveway on the left here, staff is not familiar with this when this pad was built. The picture on the driveway on the right would be what's permitted by code. So where you have that behind the sidewalk, you have the 24 feet, and then it extends, it flares upward. That would be allowed by code without needing a variance. So the applicant has requested, a permit earlier this year to build a driveway, and the site plan here on the left side of the screen with the red side yard setbacks shows what was included in that original permit. The contractor built the driveway a little bit differently. And as you can see from the photo, what was built has the driveway wider than the 24 feet behind the sidewalk, and then also kind of flares from the actual curb cut in the right of way here. And so the applicant is requesting the variance to allow the driveway to remain as it is. But looking at the standards for a variance, staff is recommending against this request because it does not appear that there's any physical hardship associated with the property that makes, how the driveway was built versus how it was previously approved that warrants that variance. The variance actually seems to be related to how the contractor built the driveway rather than, any sort of physical hardship with the property. The staff has found that there are one, maybe two other homes that have a driveway that's wider than 24 feet behind the sidewalk, but we can't find documentation of any variances being given for that. And so, approving this variance runs a risk of establishing a precedence that then could potentially change the character of the neighborhood. So for those reasons, we're recommending against the variance, and I can answer any questions if there's any from the board.
Do you know when those other driveways were built?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that what stands is quite different than what was originally intended or presented. I mean, it's just quite different. Any other comments?
Katie, I had a question. So did the original design for the addition was given a permit and then it was done and then it was added on to the actual, because it looks like they had the one, you showed the first initial design and then also, of course, it seemed like it was added on afterwards. So were they given a permit at one time for the approved first way it was done and then they went beyond that?
So the homeowner applied for a permit, the inspector reviewed the drawings, issued the permit. I believe the permit was not paid for, so the actual permit may not have been, I have to go back and look at my report, but may not have been actually physically issued, but it was approved by the inspector as it was shown in that original drawing, looking at the drawing with the red lot lines.
Yeah, right above the original plan, it says that it was approved but never issued because the city never received payments for the permit.
Right.
What is the typical turnaround time on being approved and payment should be received by? Is there a 30-day grace?
The process is generally the applicant submits it to our department, the inspector reviews it, approves the permit, and then the property owner is notified that they need to pay, So I don't, specifically in the ordinance, I'm not sure that there is a turnaround time. I mean, the permit's not issued, physically sent out and issued until we receive payment.
Sure.
And then once the permit is issued, the permit's valid for a period of 6 months. So the homeowner has 6 months to start the work.
So Katie, do you know then how this became a request for a variance? Was there a report, residence report or a drive-by or something?
The city, yes, we received a complaint, and one of our inspectors went out and did the inspection and saw that it was built differently than what was on the application.
Okay. And then my last question is, if this is denied, what is the normal course of process that the customer or the applicant must have?
Well, so per the ordinance, whenever a variance is denied, there's a few courses of action. I'm not sure. I haven't been involved in the inspector and in this working with the inspector in this specific case, so I don't know what is specific to this applicant. But in general, when a variance is denied by fewer than 5 votes, there is an appeal to City Council, an option for an appeal to City Council. When it is denied by 5 or more votes, then there is an appeal through the Illinois appeals court, the appellate court. And then if something changes significantly in the proposed application, the applicant could also consider reapplying if there's a significant change. Otherwise, the applicant would have to wait a year to reapply for a variance. Generally, the variance applications are processed prior to doing the work. So it's usually the need for a variance is triggered when the inspector reviews the permit application before issuing the building permit.
So ultimately, the question is if they're denied and if there's further hearings and they're denied, and let's say through all the avenues it's denied, do they have to remove this or conform, or what is the ability of the customer or of the applicant?
George, please feel free to jump in if you want to add.
Well, it could be, and frankly, we have to look at these, depending on situations. But it comes down to this: if it's a non-conforming or an unpermitted use, it could very well need to be removed. That would be the most straight-ahead thing, because if it's not permitted, I mean, that's why we have permits. People are supposed to build after they get a permit, and they're supposed to build in conformity with it. So, as much as that might not be the desirable result, we are faced with a number of choices once something's built prior to being permitted, and the most obvious is removal or modification to make it within the zoning requirements.
So you could issue a permit that would fit the original approved plan that was never paid for, and then modify by, say, cutting the pad that currently exists to meet the current code.
That sounds like an option. One of the first. Yeah, I think that would. Right.
Sure.
I just wanted something out there that a lot of times we keep seeing these cases that, these variance requests come in after the fact, and especially when you're talking about concrete, what do you do? What is we know what our path is, but if that's denied, what is generally happens. So.
Yeah, and it puts things, I've seen them over the years as well, and it puts people in a bad position, and we know that. But a lot of times, so one of the things we've changed is that not only does the homeowner have a responsibility for getting the permits, but very often it's the contractor. In fact, our code places it on the contractor, partly because we know that homeowners are somewhat unfamiliar with permits, processes, and so on, and contractors aren't. You know, contractors know that they need to look for it, and if they don't get it or the homeowner doesn't get it, it shouldn't be happening. So I'm not conversant with the facts here. Perhaps we'll hear that from the petitioner. I don't know that, you know, we have to be guided by the 5 requisites for variance, and they all need to be met. Having said that, if any of those, if the, you know, the zoning board feels that the testimony here is pertinent to that, then of course they can apply those standards to the evidence they hear. And I would say this might be kind of a small correction, but if it's approved by 5 or more, the appeal route is under the Administrative Procedures Act, and it's to the court in McLean County, like over at the Law and Justice Center.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
Court of Appeal.
Thanks,
George and
George.
Katie, if I can ask a question. So it doesn't seem like this is a wide sweeping issue that are out there, but we at least have examples in the packet. So what does this mean going forward? Are we going after the other properties? Is this going to cause an onslaught of residents coming in to have to deal with this? And is that going to cause us more issues?
It's unlikely that we're like, if we see something that's not, you know, not. I don't really like to speak for the inspectors and the policy folks. I'm not really in that branch of the economic development and community development department as I once was. So I'm not clear on policies kinds of things and determining. So for example, there have been some changes because of the COVID as to what the inspectors are doing and not doing and follow-ups and so on. I will say, generally speaking, this won't it would surprise me that this would launch some crusade against non-conforming driveways. I mean, usually it comes up because of complaints or particular things, but I'd be speculating as to how that came to our attention.
George, is there a time limit on that? Like if it's been up for 15 years, can you still say, I don't want this to be there?
You know, there's pretty strong case law that there is not, but on the other hand, at some point it becomes, you know, it can become kind of like an adverse possession thing, 20 years or more, open and notorious, then there can be an argument if it involves real estate. Obviously it gets more complicated as it gets older, or it can.
So I guess my question, just as we're always trying to not do spot zoning or whatever, is this potentially set us up for a thing of targeting one homeowner and not somebody else, at least in the same subdivision, much less I'm not saying the entire city. So just curious. I just don't want to have us have any issues that are out there if we vote on this in one direction, that it causes more issues, especially since, like I said, there are at least a couple examples within the packet of others that have done this.
George, I think another point of clarification is that the zoning ordinance was modified, you know, on March 11th, 2019. So moving forward, like there are some cases where something was existing and lawful under a previous ordinance and then now would become non-conforming. And so I think in this particular case, we know that it was under this current code that it's being applied to. The other ones, I'm not sure if they were built, I mean, they were built probably under the previous code.
Okay, that at least helps. Like I said, I get worried when all of a sudden we have one that we're after and we already have other examples that are in the market that are out there.
Well, I know most of the homes in that neighborhood are earlier than that, you know, earlier than that code change.
I understand the questions, and those are good points, and they are kind of raised by, you know, the tension that we want to treat like cases similarly, and yet can't prosecute everyone, and are not under an obligation to either prosecute or, you know, bring into administrative court, and also the tension that on one hand we want to be flexible and not have a tough, overly harsh remedy, and on the other hand, not reward when something's built without a permit. So, I mean, there's different things. Maybe what we could do is move on to more of the evidence and then have questions and comments afterwards.
All right, thank you, George. Can we have a testimony from the applicant? Swear.
Mr. Shelton is on the line, and you may need to hit *6 in order to unmute yourself.
Mr. Shelton, will you state your name and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You are muted, Mr. Shelton.
Yeah. Again, *6 may work.
Okay.
How about now?
There you go.
It's good.
Oh. Yes, William Shelton, Shelton, and yes.
Okay. Okay. Can we hear your testimony?
Okay. So, back to some of the comments about the permit not being paid for or whether it was paid for. So we were under the impression that the contractor was supposed to pay it. And then we find out after the fact that it had not been paid for. So then we sent the money in to pay for the fee. And then some of the other issues that we ran into, like we knew that there was complaints about our driveway before the work was even completed. So the original driveway had been torn out. The new driveway was framed in. Somebody from the city came out, took pictures of the project, and said, everything looks great, you're good to go. And they left. So that's when the rest of the driveway was poured. The whole thing was framed in when somebody came out and took pictures of it. So we thought everything was still good. As far as the completed work and the original permit that was applied for, we have no reason why the contractor would have changed what we requested. So anyway, is there any questions we need to answer from you guys, or what's next?
The next step is they ask questions.
Any comments or questions?
Okay. Questions from us?
So my question for you, Mr. Shelton, is, the initial drawings and the initial ask varies greatly from what was poured and what was actually done. And I mean, clearly there's two different sets there, and you must have known that it was different. And I guess what I'm taking from your testimony is that, yes, you knew that there was a difference from what was submitted on the application, but somebody from the city drove by and gave you a verbal okay.
Yes.
Okay, not a new permit or anything submitted.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Because apparently,
So let
There
me
was
follow up,
an
Mr.
original
Shelton.
complaint.
The verbal okay clearly showed that there was an extension to the driveway.
well, apparently the original complaint on our driveway was somebody felt that we weren't complying with the 0 lot line. You have to be more than 3 feet from your property line, which our new driveway is almost 5.5 feet from the property line of the neighboring home. So that was what the original complaint was when they came out and took pictures, and then they took pictures of the whole project and told us to carry on.
Okay, this was before it was poured though, but it was clearly visible that there was going to be that large extension.
Correct, because the whole thing was framed in. And the ground was stamped, everything was framed in, the concrete just hadn't been poured yet.
And did you get a name of the person from the city?
No, sir, I didn't, but they were in a marked city vehicle. I didn't get a name, and I probably wouldn't have been able to remember the name if I talk to him anyway.
And to be clear as well, Mr. Shelton, there was no permit issued with a new design or requested with a new design.
Correct.
How difficult is it to become into code, to go back to the original design?
Well, it appears we would have to remove, I think you call it a flare, the piece that's wider between the curb and the sidewalk would have to be torn out and removed. And then in order to put the flare on the other side of the sidewalk, from the sidewalk to the house, we would have to tear out the first section of the side of the driveway and have that reframed and repoured.
Okay, thank you. Are
Yeah, and
there any people, any witness to speak in favor of the project? Or against the project?
No one other than the applicant registered to speak, and there's nobody at City Hall. We also did not receive comments in advance.
Okay, so can we have the findings of fact and vote on it?
Ms. Harris, would you like me to share the findings on the screen?
Yes, please.
Ms. Harris, would the board like to vote individually on each finding or vote as a whole on all the findings?
If no one objects to it, I'd like to vote as a whole.
I think we'd need a motion on that, a motion to,
I'd motion to take the findings of fact as a whole.
Second.
and that's as recommended, accepting the staff's recommendations, is that what?
Sure. Yep. Yes.
Okay. Now, with respect, just a point of clarification, with respect to a petition for the variance, all of the standards have to be met for the petition to be successful. This is different than sometimes when we have, you can have an or, say 2 or 3 of the standards need to be met. So, okay, so there's a motion.
Did we have a second? Is there a second to the motion?
I seconded.
Okay, thank you. Now, if a yes vote means we agree that the standards are not met, or we just say not met?
So the motion that Mr. Noonan made is to accept the staff findings, which would be that the standards are not met. So a yes vote would be, yes, you agree with staff that the standards are not met.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Smith,
Okay.
Are you ready for a roll, Chairperson Harris?
Please.
Mr. Valentini,
Yes.
Mr. McFarland,
Yes.
Mr. Straza,
Yes.
Mr. Noonan,
Yes.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
Chairperson Harris.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Shelton, that you seem to have felt that you were misinformed, that the standards are not met.
can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Okay, good. So when we were notified of the code violation, there was a date that was set that we had to prove that we were in the process of trying to become compliant or get a variance. And the fines get kind of hefty. So obviously we can see where the vote's going to go. Is there a time frame that we have before the fines start? Or I just need more, after all this voting and stuff is done, I need to know that part.
Mr.
Time frame.
Yeah, that's a good question. And my name is George Boyle. I'm Assistant Corporation Counsel. And so the attorneys who are handling that are colleagues of mine in the legal department. And if you call tomorrow and speak, you can talk with me, and I'll put you in touch with the attorney who's handling your case. Frankly, I don't know your case, so I don't want to, tell you something that's not accurate. But you can talk with me or email me. It's gboyle@citylm.org.
Okay.
And I'll make sure you get an answer to that.
G Boyle.
Yes, G is in George, and then Boyle is Boyle.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Best of luck.
So, Ms. Harris,
Okay, case is closed.
just a point of clarification. I think we do need to do a vote on the variance itself.
On the variant. Yes, I'm sorry, yes, great.
So I motion to reject the motion, the variance as requested.
Second.
Mr. Ballantini?
Anybody-
Yes.
Mr. McFarland?
Yes.
Mr. Straza?
Yes.
Mr. Noonan?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
And Chairperson Harris?
Yes.
Carries.
Okay, it carries. The standards were not met. Case is closed. Can we move on to Z 2720, offense variation? So we have the staff finding. Can we have the staff findings?
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself.
You've done it.
There we go. This time. So for Z 2720 at 2821 Chesapeake Lane, we have similarly a petition for a variance that would allow for a 6-foot fence in the front yard, which is 2 feet taller than the zoning ordinance allows. The petition does not meet all the standards for a variance, and so staff is recommending a denial of the requested variance. A little bit of property context and information. The lot size is about 11,000 square feet. It's located toward the northeast of the city's municipal limits. It's a corner lot. It's diagonal to the neighborhood's northern entrance off of Fort Jesse Road over here. In terms of zoning and land use, it's single family residential R1C and pretty much in every direction is similar single family residential in zoning and in use, except for north, as you can see, is county agriculture land. It's worth noting that corner lots, no, everything's out of order. My bad. Okay. It's worth noting that corner lots have sort of a weird, unique situation per our ordinance. They are considered to have 2 front yards. The setback for each is 25 feet, and the maximum fence height is 4 feet in the front yard. Side yards and rear yards, you can construct a 6-foot fence by right, but they have to be beyond that 25-foot setback for the front yard in order for that to work. The applicant was the subject of a zoning enforcement case after installing the fence without a permit or variance. They do have that large tree here that would have to be removed in order to facilitate the installation of a side yard fence. Also with noting that there aren't any other properties in the neighborhood that appear to have front yard fences taller than the permitted 4 feet. This is a similarly situated neighboring property. It's toward the southern entrance of the neighborhood, also a corner lot. The fence appears to be 6 feet in height. However, since it's set back in line with the structure on the lot, it would qualify as a side yard fence. And so that 6 feet in height is permitted by right. In terms of the findings of fact, the first being that the property has physical hardship or practical difficulties that make strict adherence to the code difficult. Other than the large tree, this is not the case. Other measures could be taken, like supplementary landscaping, in order to create additional screening. Additionally, the ordinance permits a 4-foot fence in the front yard, so this standard's not met. The second standard, that the variance is the minimum action necessary to provide relief to the applicant. This is met, as other courses of action would require that tree to be removed, additional landscaping to be installed, and the presently installed fence to be shortened or removed altogether. That standard's met. The third standard is not met, as the variance request is in part related to concerns regarding the applicant's dog. The tree reportedly was planted by a prior occupant, and the request is also likely intended to legitimize the installation of the existing non-conforming fence. That standard's not met. The fourth standard's not met, as other corner lots along Summerview Lane have employed measures that generate additional degrees of privacy for their occupants that don't involve 6-foot tall front yard fences. So that, some examples include larger setbacks or denser landscaping. Granting the fence height variance without identifiable hardship could establish a precedent for the neighborhood, and so that standard's not met. And then lastly, that the variance will not be detrimental to the neighborhood's character. The fence is built because no other properties have a fence at that height in the front yard. It creates an anomalous visual barrier within the neighborhood. If the variance were to be granted, it would establish a precedent, potentially leading to more fences of this sort to be constructed, which would alter the character of the neighborhood and possibly present challenges to visibility. And so with that, we're recommending a denial of the requested variance.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Are there any questions or comments?
I guess I have a question, and maybe this leads back to Katie. So in my short tenure being here, just a little bit over a year, it seems like we've had a lot of these side corner lot issues that have come up. Is this something that we should be addressing, being able to like position up to the city council, or like do we know what's causing them to happen out there? Are we not discussing it enough with the people as they're either doing fences or whatever? It sounds like with this particular fence, they just did it and didn't contact anybody from the city until after everything was done. But just curiosity of why we keep on having them, and could we eliminate that from being a continual issue coming before the zoning board?
Could I, and this is George Boyle, could I suggest that we take that maybe under new business at the end of the meeting, so we've heard all of them, and we might have some input then that would be useful, and it wouldn't be on this petition's record necessarily.
That'd be great, George. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? If not, can we swear in the petitioner?
Mr. Huddleston, you are on the call, but you're muted, so you will have to hit *6.
Hello. There you are.
Hello. Will you state your name and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Michael Huddleston, and I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay, thank you. Can we have your comments about the petition statement?
Yeah, just background on how I ended up with a fence that didn't meet the zoning requirements. I had gone out to the city of Bloomington, I got on Google and I searched city of Bloomington fence requirements, and I found the code, and in the code it says front yard 4 foot, side yard, backyard 6 foot. But and specifically in the fence area, it didn't explain corner lots having 2 front yards, which, I'm sure there's another section like a glossary or something in the code where it does explain that. But so I saw that in the fence section, and I knew that my address was on Chesapeake. So in my mind, I thought, well, that's my front yard. This part behind, or I guess to the side of my house, that's not front yard. And then we had the fence put in by a contractor, and I did not know that they did not get a building permit for the fence until the fence was completed, and then we got the violation notice from the city. And then when I submitted the permit at that point, I found out that about the corner lots having the 2 front yards, and I also found out I guess there is a pamphlet that you can get that it kind of explains all that to you. So that's kind of how I ended up at the point of having a fence that was in violation. In our neighborhood, on Chesapeake, farther down the road, there is a house that's got 6 foot fence that is in the front yard. It's kind of like ours. It's on the corner of Chesapeake and what is that? Oh, Chesapeake and Barrington. And the fence comes out from the garage on the driveway side. It, extends out farther than the house and everything, and then runs parallel to Chesapeake. And then there's another one. It's on Eagle Crest. And it comes out as well, and it may be 6 or 5 feet, but it's an older fence also. I don't know the address to that, but, and I guess that's kind of the third part of how I ended up with this is, I walk my dog through the neighborhood. I've walked by those houses numerous times. I've walked in other neighborhoods in Bloomington, because the dog needs a lot of exercise. She's active dog. And I've been to streets, like numerous locations, like on College, the neighborhood to the south there has some. But anyways, I just had seen it in other places. And I know ultimately, the responsibility of getting the permit is on the homeowner, but it just never occurred to me that we didn't have one until we got the violation. Like we had said in the write-up, we would like a 6 foot fence just because we are on that very north end of the neighborhood, and there's a lot of car traffic. Obviously not so much now with COVID and everything, but especially in the mornings, school time, because a lot of the neighborhood goes that way to go out to Grove and to go to NCHS. And then at the end of the school day in the buses. And the other thing is that there's a lot of foot traffic as well, as Chesapeake, Summerview, and Peppertree make a nice big loop. And for people out walking, families, whatever, it's pretty popular, pretty busy, especially in the summertime. And because of that, we wanted to have a 6-foot fence just to provide a little more privacy in our backyard. And like I said in the petition, that large tree, it's a willow hybrid, and the previous owners had planted it. I guess it must be about 20 years old now. But a line coming off from the front of the garage would be right in the front of that tree. And then if you carried that farther back, if you ended up in between two of the trees, I'd be just concerned about getting into the roots in that area because they're just such big trees. And I know that, you know, they kind of have invasive root structures. That they're also, the reason the previous owners planted them is that they're very fast growing trees, and that makes them a little more susceptible to maybe having issues with their long-term health. But that was kind of the main reason we didn't want to pull the fence that far back. Another issue, and I hadn't put this in the application because I hadn't even really thought about it, but our neighbor to the east of us, they moved in after us, and I guess the previous people maybe didn't have a dog or anything, but they did. So they built their fence, and it actually, they don't have fence running along ours. So if we pulled our fence back to in between the two trees, there'd be a gap in their fence as well, which I don't know how much that matters, but all of that kind of went into our thinking, and that's kind of how we ended up where we were, or where we are.
Okay, thank you. We have time for some questions or comments. I have one. Do you know those other structures that have 6-foot fences, do you know when they were built or approximately?
I don't know. Like I said, there's the two in our neighborhood, and the one is obviously quite a bit older. The other one I don't know. But then the ones, especially along some of the streets off of College, and I realized that, you know, we're not directly on Fort Jesse. Some of those are directly on Fort Jesse, and I mean, some of them look newer, but I honestly don't know, you know, when they were built. Some of them are obviously older. Some of them seem really new.
Okay.
And
But, you know, I do know
Question
that
is
we do have
whether
the
or not they were under the code that we have now.
that I don't know. When was this code recently changed, or?
yeah, Katie, I was going to ask that. Is that something, have we had a code change that's been out there? Because I at least know the neighborhood, because I have walked through there and everything, and there are quite a few fences that are meeting that 6-foot on the side yard type of thing that he is discussing.
So that was in our previous code. The code was changed in 2019, but the two front yards on a corner lot and the 6-foot fence only being allowed in the side and rear yard, those were in the previous code.
Thank you.
Oh, I see. Can I make a comment just quick?
Sure.
Okay. Kind of regardless of how you guys rule, if in that code, if there's just like an asterisk, like by the front yard that says C definition section, whatever, or, you know, I mentioned, cause it's got like, I know that, you know, you walk around town, even in my neighborhood, you can find chain link fences. And I know that's not allowed now, and that's spelled out in that fence code. So if there was something like that in that code, because I heard someone, you know, asking how can we kind of prevent this in the future, that, you know, might be something that would, you know, certainly would have triggered me to dig a little deeper on this before I committed.
Katie,
Thank you. We can ask.
I've just got a quick question, and I know we'll probably talk about this later per Tyler Noonan's question, but are any of these topics listed on the websites for the city, or is this just in a pamphlet?
I was just looking at that. I can look online again and bring it up later, but the permit application is online, and the zoning code is online, but I'm not seeing a specific website that spells out the fence regulations outside of the zoning ordinance, or that has the pamphlet online. So I think those are, we can talk about that more later. If you'd like.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you know, if in that 44.9.10, you know, if it said see pamphlet, whatever, or, you know, front yard asterisk, corner lots have 2 front yards or something, then, you know, immediately I would have said, oh, well, I need to check this out a little more.
Also, just Mr. Huddleston, we received the photos that you sent prior to the meeting, and so Caitlin had those up on the screen. But I just wanted you to know that we did get those, and she pulled those up on the screen while you were talking.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So what is the approximate distance from the tree to the fence?
Currently,
Yes.
I honestly don't know without going out there. The tree to the fence along the street is a fairly good distance. The trees, all of them to the fence off on the side is maybe, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 feet maybe. I'm looking out my window at it now. And those were, I don't know when that fence was put in. I don't know, because if I understand the history right, there was somebody had the house built and then sold it very shortly after. And then the property in 97, and then the property owners who we bought it from, they came in and they planted the trees at some point. I don't know when the fence was there. When they put the new fence along that property line, the posts went about exactly where the posts were. But I don't know if that matters at all, but.
Thank you. About your question for clarification, can we ask that that be done, Katie? Can we ask that if it's not clear what a corner lot has in terms of front yards, can we ask that that be amended a little bit more clear?
I think that's one of the things that we could talk about when we discuss, you know, things to do and whether there's, you know, subsequent action we could take. I would say though that, and it sounds like there's could be a couple things that happened. One was perhaps confusion, and then the other may also be that the contractor didn't get the permit they're supposed to get. Most contractors know they're supposed to be getting permits, and that's often when this kind of thing would come up as well.
Right.
Seems like a lot of this is contractor didn't do, you know?
Thank you. Is there anybody to speak for or against this application?
No one else registered, and there's nobody at City Hall. City Hall is closed to the public. So.
Okay, thank you. So can we proceed to the finding of fact?
Caitlin, can you please share your screen again?
Does anyone want to make a motion as to how to proceed, whether we would take them individually or whether we would vote on them initially? And as a group, as recommended by staff, and then if that's not successful, look at them individually.
George, do all have to pass in order for it to pass on this?
Yes, on variances,
Yes.
They do.
I would make a recommendation that we take them all as a whole.
I second it.
And that's as recommended by staff, suggesting where the standards are met or not met.
That is correct.
Mr.
We've got a
Ballantini.
motion and go ahead.
Sorry.
A motion and a second, right?
Yes.
Mr. Ballantini,
Yes.
Mr. McFarland,
Yes.
Mr. Straza,
Yes.
Mr. Noonan,
Yes.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
and Chairperson Harris.
Yes.
Carries.
Carries. So can we have a motion about the variance request?
So I make a motion to deny the variance request.
Is there a second? Is there a second for this?
I'll second.
Was that
Anna Call?
Mr. Straza who seconded or Mr. McFarland?
We'll let Mike Strauss have it.
Okay. Chairperson Harris, are you ready for a roll
Yes.
call?
Mr. Ballantini,
Yes.
Mr. McFarland,
Yes.
Mr. Straza,
Yes.
Mr. Noonan,
Yes.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
Chairperson Harris.
Yes.
That carries.
Okay, the variance is denied. I'm sorry, Mr. Huddleston, that you were confused about the requirements, but they do not.
No problem. Just like I said, G. Boyle, I copied that down with the last guy.
Oh, that's fine. No, feel free to
just in
do
case
that.
things didn't go my way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You have
Yeah,
that.
so I'm not sure what the timeline is. If I just need to, go out with a saw and cut it down to 4 feet and then fix it in the spring, or if
Yeah, I
what
don't
the
know how they
timeline
want to
is on
handle
that.
it. I don't want to second guess the attorneys and the other people that are handling your case and give you cross messages. But if you check with me tomorrow, I'll make sure you get in touch with them.
Okay, and is it you, or is it the zone enforcement guy, or is it out of his hands now? Is it into different people's hands now?
I'm not sure what if you contact me, I'll talk with them. I don't know. I have no idea about, I think he
Sure.
might have an administrative court case, but I'm not sure what it is.
No,
I'll look into it.
That's great.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. Bye.
We'll move on to Z2920, offense height variance request. Can the
Yeah,
staff?
this one is, oh, sorry. Yeah, for the staff report, this one is
Yes.
similar. 1 second. So as in the last case, it's a 6-foot fence in the front yard, 2 feet over what would be permitted by code. The petition does not meet all the standards for a variance, and so we are recommending a denial of this variance as well. 220 Willard, it's a corner lot in the Founders Grove neighborhood. The lot size is about 6,000 square feet. You can see it outlined in black here in the aerial view, and then this is the property as it currently exists, as well as the fence as it currently stands. For context, in terms of zoning, it's largely residential, mostly surrounded by different kinds of residential. So there's single family zoning to the north. There is also an apartment complex here in the multifamily zoning district. To the south, it's not visible on this map, but there is P2 with I believe it's Oakland Elementary School located to the south of the property. To the west, there is mixed residential. I believe that's a children's home. And then to the east, it's more single family residential. As with the last case, corner lots do have 2 front yards. I don't know if I need to go back over the standards for that, but the setback is 25 feet for the front yard, maximum fence height 4 feet. In the side and rear yards, the fence can be built up to 6 feet by right. So similarly, this applicant was also the subject of a zoning enforcement case after installing the fence without a permit or a variance. Additionally, the unfinished side of the fence here, this was cited in the zoning enforcement case, the unfinished side of the fence is facing out away from the property. There are other corner lots in the neighborhood that have front yard fences exceeding 4 feet in height or appear to based on Google Street View. But those that I checked, I didn't find any documentation of a variance or of a permit granted. There was one instance where the permit was granted for a 4-foot tall fence, but it appeared to exceed that. So as to the findings of fact, the first being that the property has physical hardship or practical difficulty that makes strict adherence to the code difficult. The standard is not met, as there don't seem to be any physical characteristics that would prevent constructing a side yard fence on the subject property. The second standard, that the variance would be the minimum action necessary to afford relief to the applicant. There are certainly larger circumstances at play, but the lot has no physical characteristics that would prevent the applicant from employing alternative means of screening their property. For instance, as mentioned previously, the 6-foot side yard fence could be constructed by right, or landscaping could be installed in conjunction with a 4-foot high front yard fence. The third standard, that the need for the variance was not created by the applicant. There are definitely broader circumstances again, but the physical conditions of the property don't appear to present any challenge in putting up a 6-foot tall side yard fence by right. And as in the last case, the variance request is possibly intended to legitimize the installation of the existing fence. So the standard is not met. The fourth standard is not met. As I mentioned, there are some of those corner lots with front yard fences that appear to exceed 4 feet. But granting the variance without an identifiable hardship may establish a precedent. And lastly, that the variance will not be detrimental to the neighborhood character. In this case, the fence directly abuts an alleyway, as you can see in this photo here, that might violate site distance requirements as set out in Chapter 44, Section 9-9. So that standard is not met. And with that, we are recommending a denial of the variance.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Are there any comments or questions?
Caitlin, could you determine the fence in the alley? You know, one is facing one way, one's facing the other way. One looks newer than the other one. Are they the same age? They don't look like it.
I believe the fence has the unfinished side facing outward is older. It seemed to show up in Google Images or Google Maps where the 6-foot tall front yard fence didn't. So I believe it's older.
So do we know from Google Photos earlier, if you looked at that, to determine where the other part of the fence could have been? Was it in the same location? Was it, you know, per spec?
Sorry, could you rephrase that?
Sure. So, you know, the newer, can we go back to the picture? Yeah, that newer part right there is new, clearly. I mean, it's newer than the other section. So were you able to tell by Google Photos if the new fence is replacement of another fence that was there prior, or if the other fence that was there adjacent to the old part was in compliance?
The previous fence, based on Street View, I believe it was sort of a step down situation. So where that the older section is, it sort of stepped down in height and became compliant. I believe the new section went in place of what was the 4-foot tall front yard fence, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, can we swear in the applicant?
Okay, there we go.
Star 6 suggestion.
Hello, this is Brooke Hermanowicz. And I think I'm supposed to say, yes, I swear.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So can we have your description?
Yes, from what one of the gentlemen was just saying, the fence, as I saw it as a homeowner, was a replacement to what we had. It was worn down, broken, falling apart, nails protruding, all sorts of issues. And we have a rescued dog, as I mentioned in my letter, that it protects the passerbys, you know, from when they're walking by, as well as a privacy for our 14-year-old daughter when she's in the backyard playing. I did write the personal letter describing an incident that happened at my house. I realize that is not part of your variance code, but when looking around our neighborhood, there are several fences, such as ours, that are, you know, above the 4 foot. I did speak with several neighbors and seeing if that would, you know, be an issue for them with, you know, the visibility, especially with the neighbors to the back of us on Kreitzer. And it is not an issue with them or any surrounding neighbors. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm nervous talking to you.
Sure.
So just listening from the last person and the variance being denied, I guess that kind of made it a little harder for me to speak. I received a letter or a phone call or a letter from David Silver, and he basically told me I needed to go this route because my permit would be denied. I don't know if I need to add anything to this. I guess just besides the fact that I feel like I've added improvements to this house and it does not take away from the neighborhood. Actually, I have most neighbors that compliment me on the work that we've done to our house. So thank you for reviewing my information. I think that's all that I have. Thanks.
Do we have any
This is
questions
George
for
Boyle.
Mr. Manowitz?
I just wanted to supplement by saying that David Silver, that was mentioned by the applicant, is an inspector from the city.
Mm-hmm.
And to supplement that, the permit that was mentioned was applied for after the zoning case was brought forward.
So Brooke, I've got a question for you. You mentioned that you did replace the older version of the fence that was there prior, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And was it in conformity to our code at 4 feet or a step down as I think Caitlin mentioned?
It stepped down. Okay.
And when we look, I mean, we have to look and judge based on what the code is. And as may know or may not know, codes do change, in certain areas, whereas they might have been one way a year ago and they're different this year. And we have to go with what the law states. One of the concerns I've got is that you're in an alley and you're butting right up to the sidewalk. And it makes it very difficult if somebody's coming down that alley from an opposite end and walking, by your fence. And I think that's why we have certain code. So that way, not only is it, pleasing and conforming to the neighborhoods, but, for safety aspect.
Okay. Yes, I appreciate you, talking on those points, that alley specifically is abandoned by the city and nobody drives in it. We just had a new neighbor that actually helped clear some of the overgrowth in that alley, but a lot of that alley right there, people can't even really walk through and see through. So it isn't a maintained part of the city.
I appreciate that, but it also goes to the fact that it is a city alley. And whether it's, overgrowth or not a drive-through, it's still an alley. And there is still an area that you can't really see if somebody, would go to the house. Because I could see, if we could go back to that picture, Katie, perhaps. It's cleared enough to go down at least 2 or 3 houses. I can see at least 3 houses down, and somebody might, have to have certain things delivered or anything back that way, and so that's the concern. It's just a safety thing.
I will have to let you know that between our household and the new neighbors, we were the one that cleared that alley. It was not cleared before.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more comments, is there anybody to speak for or against this application?
Ms. Harris, we have David Wiltz on the call who registered to speak in favor, and then we also received an email that was shared with you prior to the meeting.
Okay, can we swear in Mr. Wells?
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Will you state your name and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, hear you clearly.
Yes, my name is Dave Wiltz. I also reside at the property at 220 Willards. Brooke and I are a couple. I have done a lot of the work here myself. So to start with, yes, that fence, the fence in question, we replaced it with a new fence in the exact same location as the pre-existing fence. It was in, dilapidated condition. It was awful. In doing so, we had to remove a lot of the overgrowth and whatnot from the alley because that was vines and trees and whatnot were growing into the fence, and it was unsightly, and there was no access to the alley whatsoever. What we're asking for, and it's a little bit worded funny, but we're not asking for any additional fence. The wording on the letter came back that we want to put a fence around the front yard. That's not true. All we're asking for is to keep the fence that we've installed already. Whatever we have now is what we want to keep. We don't want to fence off the front yard, obviously. That's the intersection of Willard and Taylor there, and we're not asking for any more fence. In regard to the email that was sent, like all the other, there is a section of newer fence that's on the opposite side of the yard, on to the north, and that was permitted. The garage and the lean-to and all that construction was also permitted. I worked closely with Mike Conroy to get all that done. In fact, he helped me redo my blueprint to make it conform with the code. And so the fence in question is, we just want to keep what we have. We're not trying to, build any more fence in our front yard. We just want to keep our backyard fence. And I think this goes back to the last applicant who was dealing with the fact that it's a corner lot. Ours is a corner lot, and my question is, where does our backyard and our side yard, what's the boundary between the back and the front? Because the fence in question only encompasses the backyard. It doesn't encroach further past our, the back of our house towards the front. and along the sidewalk, along Taylor any further. All we want to do is keep what we have in the back. And that was only, replaced existing fence.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
I don't know. Do we need to explain to the gentleman that was just speaking? I guess it's figure
Yes.
3 that shows that according to the code, the area where the fence is there on that side yard is stating that that is now considered front and not backyard. It would have to be basically going directly off of the back of the house. Is that correct, Katie? If for it to be, the backyard is right there along it.
That's right,
Correct.
Mr. McFarland. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Caitlin.
No, it's all right. It just has to be set back 25 feet or more, since that's the required front yard setback. And so that's what determines what's a front yard versus what's a side yard for corner lots.
Can you explain that again? I'm having a hard time hearing. But the definition of backyard versus front yard, that's what I'm not clear with, because the fence obviously, it encompasses the backyard, and then it turns down Taylor Street along the backyard, the back side yard, until there is a sidewalk that was pre-existing and poured, and there's a gate along that fence from Taylor heading north into our backyard. The fence has a gate, continues another like 10 feet, and then retreats back to our house. It does not continue forward into the side yard or the front yard at all. We're only fencing off our backyard.
Sir, so the zoning code considers, because we understand your house faces Willard Street, but because there is a public street on the side of your property there on East Taylor, it's considered a front yard because it has frontage. So, that is why it's a front yard. I know it functions to you as a backyard, but per the definition of our code, because it has frontage along a public street, then it's considered front yard.
So it's front yard all the way into the deep corner of my backyard that abuts an abandoned city alley. That's front yard.
So the front yard is defined as the area between the front lot line, so where your lot line is that abuts the street, right, and the foundation of your house. So in this case, because your house is older,
the fence actually connects directly to the original foundation of our house. If you're looking at that map on Taylor Street, there's a gate to the fence that corresponds with the pre-existing sidewalk that someone has poured, as an entrance from the Taylor sidewalk into our backyard. We have our own little, sidewalk. The fence has a gate there and continues forward along the side yard until it gets to the original foundation corner of our house. That's, it's over 100 years old. So that's, we put it there to correspond with the pre-existing structure. And this falls back to earlier, but also to when I originally replaced the broken fence, the old one, I put the finished side to the interior of our backyard only to correspond with the pre-existing fence that, like to the alley, it's unfinished to the alley and finished to the backyard. So as I came to the corner of Taylor, I continued with the finished side to the inside. When we got our first letter that, at that point we were ignorant of doing wrong. I thought the biggest complaint or the biggest concern of the neighbors was the, unfinished kind of ugly look to it. So I, at my own expense, have now double-sided the fence. So it's now, it's got finished pickets on both sides to the outside to appease everyone that can see it from Taylor, and also on the inside so it matches the pre-existing fence. So really the only thing in question is the additional height from 4 to 6 feet.
Right.
And
Well,
on that,
no, I don't think that's the only question here. It's not only it's the height, it's the setback from the sidewalk as well. I understand I understand that you put this in replacement of the one that was grandfathered in there before. You did make adjustments to the part on the other side of the sidewalk that runs to your house. You added some more space that looks like it goes up to the back part of your house. So that is slightly different. That is slightly different than what the 4 foot was. But when it comes down to it, it's that it's over 6 feet, or it's 6 feet. It's over the 4 feet requirements, and it needs to meet code on the setbacks because it's new.
The extension part where you're referring to past the sidewalk, that part goes to the original foundation corner of the house. There is a kitchen addition that was also pre-existing when we purchased the house that juts out further towards our backyard.
Right.
No,
I completely understand that, but it's different than what the original fence was. The 4 feet.
Okay. Point taken. That little section is different, but it's different to the original fence, but it is, faithful to the original construction of the house, to the original foundation wall.
Sure.
Everything on that addition is just built on a crawl space, and it's
sure. And I as a zoning board member, I appreciate. I live in a 120-year-old house. I appreciate you guys buying and loving a house and taking care of it and adding and improving and making the neighborhood better. Founders Grove is just is the place to be. I understand.
We love Founders Grove, and we love this house, and that's why we've done everything we've done. And to get the letter today from a neighbor saying that we're trying to build a compound is, absurd, and it's also offensive. We have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this place, and the way he wrote it is like we're building a compound and trying to build a fence around our whole front yard, and that's obviously very incorrect. We just want to keep the fence we have. We've got a 14-year-old daughter. There's tons of foot traffic up and down Taylor right there. In fact, some of the notes that he wrote in his email were troubling at best. The fact that he's somehow looking into our yard, even though he's complaining about our privacy fence, makes me think he's, again, I have a 14-year-old daughter.
Sure. So we as a board, we have to, our considerations are based on what the zoning codes are existing today, and whether the variance meets, slightly meets, does not meet, and go forward. And I think, and I'm not talking for any other member, but for myself, it just comes down to two things. Does it meet code? Is it the right height requirement, and is it the right setback on a new structure? And that's all that we have to consider. We do consider, everything that you've spoken, you testified to. We consider other individuals that, write, responses in favor and denial. But we have to make our decisions based on what we feel is really just code.
Right. And so, in my understanding for the point of this meeting was that we were all in agreement that it did not meet code, and that's why we were applying for this variance, because we're, at this point, we're desperate. We're begging for you guys to let us keep our fence. We've done nothing but improve this house for 7 years now since we've owned it. And, this is one of the many things that we've done to not just improve our house, but the neighborhood and our own personal security. And it's devastating to think that someone wants to take that away from us.
Well, we don't want to take away the fence. We want to perhaps, be in compliance with code, and that would be, a 4-foot fence and a setback.
And to us, a 4-foot fence is, it just doesn't really solve the issues that we've had. We've had security concerns. We've had several people, not just, and obviously we have a new one today with the email that was written by apparently a neighbor, but we've had several other instances of, people driving by slowly or walking and checking it and looking at her. We've got a young, attractive daughter over there in a trampoline. It's ridiculous. We're begging for some leniency here and hope we can be heard.
Can I just say, as a commissioner, Mr. Wiltz, thank you for your testimony and everything, but maybe we need to kind of move on and head on to the next thing, unless there's more information you can provide us based on the ordinance.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Is there anybody to speak for or against this?
Chairperson Harris, no one else has registered. The city did receive a written comment that was shared with both the applicant and the board. I can pull it up on my screen if you'd like me to do that, but that was from Janet and Dennis Fries.
Okay, can we see it? If anybody hasn't seen it?
So we received an email and then the letter attached.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the staff report and the findings of fact?
Do we want to take this as a whole, or do we want to vote on this on individual, Ms. Harris?
You want to make a motion to take it as a whole?
Ms. Harris, I'm sorry. But real quickly, Brooke was the applicant, and I don't know if she has any additional questions or comments, a rebuttal to the email that was presented. Mr. Wiltz was not the applicant. So.
Thank you.
This is Brooke Hermanowitz. Were you asking if I had any additional comments?
About that letter.
About what? About the letter?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my overall reaction or commentary to that was disheartening because of the positive feedback that we receive by our surrounding neighbors, verbally telling us how much they appreciate what we've done with this house. Built in 1925, my realtor wanted me to turn around and not get into this. So yes, to have a letter sent in such a manner was disheartening to something, like Dave mentioned, we put a lot of time, effort, money into. It's concerning that someone is looking into our backyard. I mean, I don't know how tall this person is. If that fence is too tall as it stands. Is he 7 foot tall to look and see what we have going on in our yard? So yeah, that is a security concern right there. I guess, yeah, I received, I looked up what was sent about that, and it did throw me off guard before this meeting with you all. And as far as, when it was mentioned before in Founders Grove, which I am so happy to be here, and then didn't notice that there were more 6-foot fences until I got my own compliance letter that are on corner lots throughout this neighborhood. I just don't understand. I feel like I was, like I'm almost being bullied. Like, why is someone singling me out for this fence when apparently it's apparent that they are throughout this beautiful neighborhood and they didn't matter to me? I walk all throughout this neighborhood and didn't notice them until I got the letter. So that is all I really have to say to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brooke. Again, the code changed fairly recently. So those may have been built in a former code, in compliance with a former code that didn't specify 4 feet.
And that is, exactly why this is the route that I've taken. That is why I've come to you for a variance, because this is new process for me. When I was speaking with people that do the permitting, they said, no way, we're not going to let you have that permit. Your neighbors can't see when they're backing out of their garage. My next step was to talk and communicate with my neighbors. Does that in fact enable them to see when backing out? No, it does not. No, I do not have them as witnesses in this right now, but I did get their verbal approval that it did not, distract from their driveway or anybody else.
Sure, I appreciate your communication with them, but once again, we have to hold to the standards of the code. We, not the neighborhood approval.
Can you please give me the permit, what is the purpose of a variance? If it is not to allow something that's not usually permitted.
The protocols are stated as physical hardship, minimum action necessary, the need not created by the applicant, will not give the applicant special privilege, or the variance would not be determined to the neighborhood detrimental to the neighborhood character. So we have pretty well articulated standards that we have to see are met within this code as it stands now. So when you're asking if anybody else, what is the purpose? Sometimes there are reasons such as not created by the applicant, or special privilege, or not detrimental to the neighborhood. Sometimes we find that it is met.
Okay. Is it met with security concerns? Is that considered something that you would?
Can I, this is George Boyle, city attorney. It seems like you're asking them, but actually what they would need to do is they need to ask themselves that question once the evidence is closed. So could we see about if there's any other questions for the applicant?
If there are no questions or comments, the evidence is closed, and we can have a vote on the findings of fact.
George, I'm sorry. I have a just a quick question for you, I guess. Is there, if the applicant wanted to provide additional evidence, or if the board felt there was additional evidence that would be necessary for them to make a decision, is there can either the applicant or the board request a continuation in order to provide that evidence, or is that an option?
I think if the board, first of all, the applicant can request it if they'd like. If the board feels they need additional information, I suppose they could do that as well. I'm not sure that there's a rule that precludes it. I don't think there's a rule that precludes it. The board would have to vote on a continuance. And so whether it's from the board's, you know, say one of the board members making a motion, getting a second, and, you know, or giving a basis for that, or whether the applicant asks the board for that, and then the board, you know, makes a motion based upon the applicant's request and cause. Those are the two ways I could see that happening.
George or the board, I guess I would like to make a motion to have a continuance, just from the standpoint that it doesn't sound like the applicant understands the entire process, and a month may give them the ability to go out and investigate and come back to the board with either more reasons, or they may even drop their the variance that they've requested.
Can we ask the applicant if she thinks that she will have more reasons for a continuance?
You mean
Ms.
if she wants a
Hernandez.
continuance?
Yes.
I'm trying here. Sorry.
Brooke, I think you may have just muted yourself.
Okay, I'm here. I'm sorry. Can you
There
please
you go.
repeat that?
Do you think that you will have more reasons for a continuance?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So the board can vote on whether or not we have a continuance for this case?
I think
Whether you want to continue the matter to a date certain. Go ahead.
so.
I was
Mr. McFarland made a motion. I think we need a second. And Mr. McFarland, do you want to include a date certain in your motion?
I would just say the next zoning board meeting, so whatever the third Wednesday of January would be. In 2021, not 2020, because I'll be happy to be out this year.
It's January 20th.
I second that.
Can we have a vote?
Mr. Valentini,
Yes.
Mr. McFarland,
Yes.
Mr. Straza,
Yes.
Mr. Noonan,
Yes.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
and Chairperson Harris.
Yes,
That carried.
carries. So we
Can there be a description or some guidance for either the applicant or staff as to what's expected to be produced by the next hearing, or what may occur? I mean, I heard a little bit with the motion. I don't know how clear that what's expected by the next meeting may be.
Well, the applicant said that she has more information that she would like to submit.
Okay.
George,
Okay.
staff can follow up with the applicant as well to coordinate, you know, submitting that information and.
All right. Sounds good. So are we moving on to new business? Is it?
Do we have to vote on the continuance?
I'm sorry, I thought you did.
We did.
We will, this will be on the January 20th agenda.
Oh, okay. All right, so there will be a continuance. Do we have any other business? Any new business?
I think just going
Well,
back
one
to,
is I was wondering if we could ask for a clarification for the corner lots, for it to be clearly expressed on corner lots that there are two front sides. I mean, that seems to be the issue several times.
Ms. Chairperson Harris, if it's possible, do you mind if I share my screen? There is the drawing in the city code under the fence regulations that that Caitlin had in her presentation that shows the lot.
Okay, please.
So I have chapter 44, section 9-1 up on the screen, 9-9, I'm sorry, 9-10, fence regulations on the screen. And underneath the fence height requirements, there's a diagram that shows front yards and side yards and rear yards.
Is there a specification that on corner lots, there are 2 front yards? I think that was the issue that was suggested.
Definitely, it's in the photo. There is a, you know, the corner lot here is shown as having 2 frontages. And let me look at this specific text too.
Yeah, I see that.
In the section right above it too, Katie, the diagram before it showed, as you were scrolling through, it showed the sight lines as well.
That was one of the changes that we made in 2019, was adding these diagrams because they weren't in our previous code, and it was a little confusing. But the other change was that the finished side face the public, but the height requirement has been 4 feet in the front yard and a quarter
Katie,
lots.
do you know if?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, George.
Do you know if do we have a fence pamphlet, and is it spelled out clearly in there or with an asterisk or something? 'Cause I think that's what one of the people talked about. I'm not aware of what materials we hand out or how it's articulated in them.
We do have a fence pamphlet. I can pull it up here for you. And sorry, when I'm trying to multitask and I'm not very good at that. We do have a fence pamphlet. It's not on the website though. So, you know, the website does outline when a permit is needed, and the permit application specifically asks if it's a corner lot or what the materials will be, and the application states that the finished side needs to face outward, but the pamphlets are not on the website, and so I think that's a valid suggestion.
Yes, can we get that on there for a download?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can easily do that. I'm sorry, let me find my.
If need be too, I'd be willing to design a new pamphlet depending on what the pamphlet says, and if it needs to be made more clear.
It's not very attractive, I'll tell you that.
Do we need diagrams? Well, we got diagrams.
I thought Champagne's was unattractive.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. Yeah.
So, can you see am I sharing my screen?
Yes, you
okay.
So
I could do that pamphlet in 2 minutes.
So besides having this pamphlet and then having the picture diagram, do we have this in writing on the website too, that is specifically designated to corner lots to help people understand this? Because like I said, it just feels like, I mean, we've had 2 of them tonight alone, much less other ones. I just feel like we've got to get this clarified so it helps people, because it wastes our time, it wastes their time, they waste money. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a travesty in a time of COVID that we have an individual that put up a fence, went to the code, researched it, got a contractor, expected them to get a permit, and because of how the code was stated, I voted no tonight, or voted against his request. And like I said, looking at all of this, probably not good to say publicly, but I think we had some liability in this.
Well, I think it's stated. I don't know about liability, but I really take your point to heart that it would be nice to say specific to corner lots. Just make it real clear that there's something different.
This is George Boyle talking about just a couple things here. First of all, I think clarity is something that we want, and that's why I asked about the, materials, and that's why we put the diagrams in there, and that's why we may revise the materials. But the other thing is, permits for fences, especially for fence contractors. But, we're very clear on all our materials that fences need permits. We're clear in our ordinance that contractors are to get them. And one of the reasons that there are permits is so that when you apply, and Katie was alluding to this earlier, it can say where are you going to put your fence? Do you have a corner lot? If that's the case, then these things won't be built. I mean, these two things that happened, and I'm not saying that, again, I think there's two things that happened with the ones that didn't get permits. The first thing that happened was, looking at the evidence in the light most favorable to what they said, and so just saying, if they may very well have been confused, so we want to fix those materials. But the second thing is, whether it was the homeowner or the contractor, somebody didn't get a permit. Had they applied for a permit, they would have found out prior to the building it. So, I'm not worried about liability from the city's point of view, but I mean, we want to be accountable in terms of and clear. But I'm just saying the two things happen there.
Well, George, I would say I agree with the thing, not liable, but more accountable on that. But, sorry, I lost my train of thought on that.
But just to make it more clear to the applicant that there is a specification, it could be highlighted somehow, different specification for corner lot.
I think that's what we're going to look into. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I think that's very feasible, George. Updating the website and, updating the permit section phase or part of the website. I'm not sure where it makes the most sense. I guess we probably want to talk about that as staff. And if there's any suggestions, please let us know. Like if you've visited the website and think that, well, this would be a good spot for that information, please send us that. Because when I look at the website, I know exactly where to go to find the permits because we use it every day. But somebody who doesn't navigate it that often could probably provide a better perspective. And I think, Caitlin, you've just earned the task of making our brochure a little bit prettier.
I thought it was Mr. Valentini was volunteering to do it.
Try insulting us, Caitlin.
I did bring that on myself. That's fair.
But it's also got to be better than champagne too, okay? Got to be better than champagne.
I can pull up champagnes now if you'd like. They do actually. I had it open to see what they do about the side yard illustration, and the requirements are a little different, but this is,
yeah.
Well, that's prettier.
As a homeowner, before my pre-working for the city days, I know a lot of homeowners don't know what our requirements are. It helps if we can be clear, and it also, like I say, we try to put a lot of the onus on the contractors because they're the professionals, and they do, they know that whatever city you're building in, you want to go get a permit and or get a clear written thing saying you don't need a permit, something.
Well, George,
I'm glad we're looking at being clear with people.
George, can we have like an ice cream social, there at City Hall with all the contractors, and just kind of give them a little one-on-one?
You're looking a year or two down the road, I think.
I'm being facetious about this, but not everyone, but a lot of, like Michael's point, a lot of this comes up because there's confusion. Which is my front street? Which is my side street? Yes, I get that. It's not really clear, but it's always the contractor. Contractor didn't do this. Contractor didn't do that.
Well, most of them do. I mean, that's, but having said that, that's a good point. Maybe we could do it, I mean, this is something staff could look into at some point. It's obviously not going to happen now, but communication and education with the community, maybe something we could do. Maybe there'd be something along those lines. Especially, I think one of the things that zoning boards are good at doing, and is a fact, is that if you do see a request for variances that are similar, it does tell us something, doesn't it? So it's a good discussion.
George, I just have a quick question for you on that, which is we keep on saying the contractor, but is this basically mean the homeowner that hires the contractor now has to go to loan to go back after the contractor? Is there teeth that the city has that really can go back after these people? Because I think the lonely citizen out in the market hires somebody that tells them they can do a job, that they know how to do that job. They complete the job, they pay the person for the job looks nice. And then after all of that, their money investment's in, the contractor's gone, and on to the next thing. And because I deal with that all the time in my work of that happening. So are we, I'm just trying to understand that clarification. Is this
Well, there's
liability
different things
thing
that can happen. I don't know what the city is doing now. I know often when I dealt with it, it was our practice to go after both, but particularly the contractors because we expected them to be the educated party. The code in some places places it exclusively on them. Sometimes the code also has times where it indicates it's the homeowner's responsibility. It has some exceptions for things done at home by the homeowner, but not exceptions that would apply with respect to fence height and things like that. But I don't know if that answers your question. I think that there could be, but I don't want to speculate about other, people's cases and so on. And
is it clearly stated that, so
a lot of
that
contracts,
it's up
there's
to the
something.
contractor to take lead?
In the chapter 10, that was clearly spelled out but I will say that chapter 10 has been revised, and I have not. If you're asking me that, I would prefer to get back to you on chapter 10 before I just tell you what my recollection is as to the revision.
Okay, I would
But
like it
it's
to be
definitely
clearly spelled out if it isn't in the revision.
I'm sorry.
I would hope it would be very clearly stated if it's not in the revision, to revise the revision.
I'm pretty sure it is. I can get back to you. We can talk about that in the next meeting if folks would like.
Well, the homeowner
Sure.
also has a remedy of, going back to the contractor and, can't they, at the last resort, small claims court, sue them, whatever? Because they like in these cases, there's a cost. There's a huge cost, sometimes for these fences and things,
Well, there's a Home Repair and Remodeling Act I remember from my consumer law days, and in those for projects, I think it was over $2,000. There had to be a written contract and so on. And I know you often see in contracts we'll pull all appropriate permits, or we'll obtain all appropriate permits. So there may potentially, given the circumstances, of specific cases, be some remedies. But sometimes there's not. If it's a fly-by-night contractor and they're gone, that's potential as well.
So the homeowner should be alert to that somehow.
Well, it's in the law. I mean, even where it says the contractors will get them, it's linked to the project and is linked to the homeowner's responsibility as well. But I know that when we were doing it, we had primary responsibility. We understood that it was a kind of a joint responsibility, but we expected the contractors as the professionals, conversant with the trades, to be aware that they had to inquire as to permits.
The city's website.
Again, I'm not the one doing it right now, so there may be, I don't know what the city policies are now.
George, the website also kind of on the permits and fees page, kind of says that it's the homeowner's responsibility to ensure that they have appropriate permits, and then it explains when they're needed and when they're not needed, and then the permits are linked on that same page.
Are the other, I see their names still on here. Are they still Can they hear us?
Yes, and we are still on YouTube,
YouTube?
live
Okay.
streaming.
Okay.
What I guess what I was referring to is if the homeowners could be aware that it's the contractors need to really abide by the code.
Well, it's everybody. I mean, it's the contractor and it's the resident. I mean, the resident's got to, you know, in some cases, we find they do it themselves, you know, like this last case. And then sometimes, you know, they hire the contractor and the contractor could lie to them. They could tell them. I mean, everybody's got to try to keep, in my mind, if I hire somebody, it's my job to keep you on staff, you know, doing your job. It's your job to do it. And if like George said, if there's a contract that states that they are responsible for the permits, then I would go after them if I get into trouble afterwards, you know, claiming that they're the ones who are supposed to be getting the permits, but it doesn't preclude me from making sure that they've got it. Do you have the permits? Is everything in set? Are we ready to do the concrete? Are we ready to do the fencing or whatever that deal is? I think it goes hand in hand. I don't know.
So it sounds like what we're getting out of this is we're going to have a look at clarifying the materials with respect to the side yard issue. See if there's anything that we can do about that, and I can see what's going on with our code with respect to responsibility, which I think is both the contractors and the homeowners. I can report as to maybe how we're proceeding on those cases.
George, I'll add this to old business on the next agenda.
Right. Okay.
Is there
Sounds good.
any way we can see the fencing pamphlet? Can we get hold of the fencing pamphlet?
I can email it to
online?
you. I'll email it
Thank
to you
you.
after the meeting. Mhm.
But it's going to
Thank
change soon though, right, Caitlin?
Oh, the fancier version, the more aesthetic version?
Are we going to have like a little logo, like a little zoning mascot on there?
I hope not. I don't know how to design things.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the conversation. Is there any other business? Any new business? If not, can we adjourn the meeting at 6:02?
Instead, if folks, we'd prefer roll calls. Actually, there was a section on this where they talked about it. However, also if people don't, we can ask if there's any objection to a motion to adjourn.
Is there any objection to a motion to adjourn? Last time Katie said there's no objection, let's adjourn. If there's no objection, can we have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to.
A second.
Thank you. Thank you. All agreement?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Meeting adjourned at 6:03. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Stay safe. Thank you for the conversation.